Now let's begin the conversation. The mounting debates over the vexed issue of electronic transmission of election results have taken a new twist. The Senate has now approved amended Clause 60, subsection 3, allowing electronic transmission of polling unit results with safeguards for technical failure. The new position followed a motion moved by Senate Chief Whip Mohammed Munguno, seeking to rescind the upper legislative chamber's earlier rejection of real-time electronic transmission of election results. Now, with the adoption of the new proposal, the Senate passed an amended Clause 60, subsection 3, permitting the presiding officer at each polling unit to transmit election results electronically after Form EC8A has been duly completed and signed. Now, under the approved clause, electronic transmission is allowed where the technology does not fail and is possible to use. However, in situations where electronic transmission fails or becomes impossible, the signed Form EC8A will serve as a primary source of election results. I mean, gentlemen, this matter about, has generated a lot of controversy. But let's start with you. I mean, why do you think the Senate, why do you think the Senate actually chose to retain INEC's discretion? Talk about Section 60, sub 3, despite public demand, and for mandatory real-time transmission?
Well, you see, all these things are just couched in legalese and grammar, and everybody has been talking. The way Senate handled the matter, it was as if the Senate was giving excuses on behalf of INEC.
Oh, really?
What the Senate should have done is what they have done now. Leave whether it is real-time transmission or whatever to INEC. Let INEC now come out and say that, no, we don't have the capacity to do this. But the Senate was trying to give excuses on behalf of INEC.
But the reasons they gave, you don't think is valid enough?
Look, in this age and time, I don't think we should continue to emphasize that we cannot do this. I mean, technology has advanced in such a way that we need to be proactive. We need to think ahead. Don't think of excuses before you even start a task. I used to have an editor. When he gives a reporter an assignment, and the first, looking at the face of the reporter, if the reporter gives a sign that it is impossible, the editor would just shove him aside and call somebody else. Because immediately you want to start giving excuses before you even know the task before you. You have already defeated yourself.
But this is a general election.
It is a general election.
It's different from what happens in the newsroom.
The Senate has given itself, or the National Assembly generally, have given themselves away because they decided to manufacture excuses. Now, time is of essence. We held the last election in 2023. The Electoral Act we are talking about is 2022. What stopped the National Assembly? What is the most important thing that they've done that they have not? Immediately there was one in 2023. Apart from approving ministers and other things, this should have formed part of the first thing they will do. Now you now leave it on to the eve of the election. The Yoruba will say you don't start cutting your fingernails on the eve of a journey. They should have done this before now. The reason why they delayed it to not open it to suspicion, and that is why everybody is going, hey, they don't want real-time transmission. They don't want electronic this. They don't want electronic. See, if before now, and this is a lesson for the future, time is of essence in election matter or anything you are doing in life. Give enough time. If they are by 2023, 2024, or even 2025, done with this, we won't have the problem we are having now. Because, see, most of the people who yesterday I saw joining the protest may not even understand what the issue is exactly. But because everybody says, they don't want to do it, everybody joined the crowd. If they had, before now, opened and done this debate, it won't take any long distance. Nobody will. They opened themselves to suspicion, and I know that because of that, that is why they did what they did today. Yesterday, Senator Ningi was on a TV station and he was talking about this thing. So, I mean, they have. If they didn't do what they did today now.
I mean, Asuko, this decision by the Nigerian Senate, it has triggered significant controversy. But do you agree with the Senate on this matter?
Well, I feel that just like you said, they should have left it for, INEC to have decided. But what the Senate actually did was, because this is when once it becomes a law.
Exactly.
That is it. That is
exactly.
You can't change it until another, 4 years or there. Another 4 years after the election. So they needed to clarify that. Because this comes based on what happened during the 2023 election, whereby the Supreme Court did not even recognize the IREV. So and so they needed something that, if at all they are taking anything to court,
something justiciable, exactly.
Yes, something should be able to give you some kind of, leverage.
Legal backing.
Legal backing. And that was why they actually brought this. But at the end of the day, I still feel that we still went back to how it was. Because if you are saying that you needed electronic voting, transmission of results, that is what we do.
Yeah.
At least Anambra election just ended. Immediately they finished at the polling unit, the presiding officer snapped, and he went to IREV. In fact, we are seeing the IREV results in our newsroom here. You understand? The results on IREV. And then they are talking about manual. Because I know most people were saying, no, cancel manual completely and then let it just be electronic. And we know the kind of country that we are.
Is Nigeria ready for full electronic?
America that we all complain about and talk about every day, do they do just manual or do they do just electronic? They don't. They do hybrid. They do both, based on your states. What if your state law says you are doing, electronic and manual? In fact, most states in America do the hybrid. They do both manual and electronic. Okay. Even the mail-in by ballot that we talk about is still paper.
It's still, of course.
You vote, you go there, and you drop. And then later they will pick it up and count. Then upload everything. You understand? So the Senate has done well, to have put bed today. Just like he said, I'm not sure they should have, gotten this controversy, maybe from the first sitting, plenary, the first sitting last week. They should have just said, this is what we want, rather than saying mandatory. And at the end of the day, you are now saying, no, I didn't say that. I didn't say it was mandatory.
Now, for those protesting, picketing the Senate and all, what should the Senate do to explain so that all of this misunderstanding, going on will be put to bed?
I think
You need to even ask why they were even protesting.
Exactly.
Because I asked that question, was the protest necessary?
Well, you see, the Senate Media Committee needs to do a lot of work. Okay. Because when things like this happen, you don't just, at the plenary, where every media house has reporters there, after that has been done,
you should do another press
exactly,
conference.
the Senate committee, the media committee of the Senate needs to brief the correspondents and let them understand also that these are what we arrived at, and this is what we intend to do, and so on and so forth. The essence of this is not spoon feeding. It is a way to explain to them that, look, this is what we are going to do, this is what we have agreed on, and this is the way it should be communicated. Because if you just leave it to what you decide in the plenary, you will discover that today now, if you read most of the newspapers, which is the same with interpretation differs. The way I understand the issue is different from the way you understand it. It's different from the way he will understand, and so on. So
they need to explain. The second part of this conversation, I mean, the Senate has reconstituted a 12-member Electoral Act committee. But talk to me, what's the purpose of this committee?
Okay, so this committee, don't forget that the House of Rep also, debated on this matter. And from what we know, they actually said mandatory electronic transfer of results. Okay, in addressing, with modification addressing technological specification. In essence, they are talking more about electronic. They didn't even mention manual at all. So now Senate is saying both manual and electronic. So they will now sit down with, amongst other things, like vote buying, the issue about vote buying, the penalty for vote buying, and INEC chairman's tenure and things like that. So they will address, they will now sit down and look at it. But the major will be on this, because now they have electronic here and then electronic here and manual. So those who are for both electronic and manual will have to sit down and talk, why do we need both?
All right, just hold that thought. We have Benga calling in. Benga, let's talk.
Good evening, gentlemen.
Yes, good evening.
Yes, I want to really appreciate the Senate for upholding Section 60, of this Electoral Act.
Okay.
They have saved a lot of things for us. If we are doing manual voting, manual collection, and we say you must transmit electronic results, so where? The IRF have been functioning. In the last election of the Anambra election, by around 8 p.m., about 90-something% have been uploaded. It's an electronic notice board where results are pasted electronically. The people are saying, transmission of result. So what do we need to change from what IRF have been doing?
All right, then.
And they say must be re-signed, must be mandatory. So I appreciate what they have done so far. And I feel this has saved a lot of things.
All right.
Anambra result today, election, nobody has challenged that election. The way it was conducted. And I believe INEC can do the same thing under this law that you uphold. It's another law that we're able to do that election without any controversy.
Thank you. Okay, right about now, we also have Ade calling in from London. Ade, let's talk real quick. Okay, Ade from UK.
They also said the protesters also said something about real time. And I was asking what they mean by real time. Because if I finish voting, most of them don't understand whether real time is, is it when I vote and immediately they upload? Or when I finish voting, they calculate and then they will send the result immediately. Now, most people have said that the people are saying that can't work is because every process has to go through gatekeeping, just like we are.
Normally.
If from that particular polling unit, it has to go to ward. That is why we have ward congress, we have unit, ward, states, and state congresses. If not, there won't be any need for that.
All right, just in 1 minute, round of this conversation.
I think what we should just say here is that no party has won. I mean, whether real voting or whatever. So it's a victory for all. None of the contending parties should think, oh, we won them. No.
Let them just go. The best thing is let all political parties go and prepare for election.
Absolutely.
Go and look for polling agents where necessary. You understand? Because the way they are shouting is as if they have ulterior motive. There's no point. Go and prepare for the election.
All right, gentlemen. You heard that.